Tonight's meditation talk is just like one of the most important, deep lessons and conversations in life. The question of the week in the dojo is, how can we overcome suffering? And I really like this because last week's question was, what is the purpose of the ego? And one of the purposes of the ego, and this is not me being sarcastic or facetious or anything, but one of the purposes of the ego is to suffer. That's what the ego does best. And so this is going to obviously play a big part in what I'm talking about tonight. But when we look at suffering, I want to talk about the nature of suffering. What is it? And then the necessity of suffering. Like, why is it that it happens? Why do we need it? Or what does it accomplish for us? Or what can we accomplish through suffering? So if we look first at the nature of suffering, I talk all the time when we do an especially hard class, like the first Monday of every month, which is going to be next Monday, but we're closed, but it'll be the Monday after that. So just show up on Monday and you'll get it. We do this class, and I usually give this talk about the difference between pain and suffering. For the purposes of this talk, I am going to draw this distinction, but then I'm going to kind of walk it back a little bit. So pain is necessary. You will not live without pain. And this is mental pain, emotional pain, this is physical pain, this is pain. It's going to happen. But most often, and for some people all the time, suffering is a choice. And it is not a choice that we are like making because we love to suffer. It is just on a level, it is something that is optional. And that is part of the point of this talk, because the idea of overcoming suffering means that if it's possible to overcome, then it is optional to suffer. And physical pain, you cannot be in a body without pain unless you have something. And there are actually people who have something, wires crossed, and they literally don't feel physical pain. But even then, they probably feel the anguish of like not understanding other people who feel pain all the time. So there is pain no matter what's going on with you. Pain is impersonal, and I don't mean that you as an individual don't feel pain. Of course you do. What I mean is pain is something that we can experience without taking it personally, though we often do, which is when it becomes suffering. Pain is a physical sensation or a mental sensation that feels physical. It is a very just unpleasant feeling. And we can separate ourselves from that and recognize that this is a sensation or an experience that I'm having, but it is not tied to me as a person or on my deepest level. It's something that is being experienced, but it's not something that I need to take personally. So when we suffer, it's because we have the pain, and then we start in with this cycle of thinking that goes like, why is this happening to me? Or when is this going to be over? I can't handle it. Whatever our mind does with this pain, that really is when the ego takes over and starts making it about us. And this can be about anticipation of further pain. That's the whole question of when is this going to be over, or how long is it going to go for? When you're doing a really hard class, if you know that it's just about to end, you're totally fine. There's no suffering at all. We start class and we start doing tons of strengthening, and it's just really hard, or you're just like having a very hard time concentrating on what we're doing. And then you start right in with like, oh, is this the whole class? Is this going to happen for the next hour? then of course you're going to be suffering, and you will suffer the entire time until you can let go of that kind of thought. So suffering is ego taking it personally. Suffering is also desire. This is what the Buddha says, and what lots of smart people, wise people have said about suffering, and I'll get more into the Buddha's wisdom here later on. But desire is, there are only a couple of things that can happen with desire. Most often what happens is we have a desire and it does not get fulfilled the way that we want it to get fulfilled. The other thing that happens is desire gets fulfilled, and so we say, great, new desire, next. And you can get your brand new car and you love it. And then you're driving around and you see everyone's got this car. I want something different. I want something better. And you see another car that you want even more. There was some well-known CEO, I want to say it was the founder of PayPal or something like that. And he says, I want to be a Prius person. I don't want to be a Ferrari person, because you get the Prius and you're like, that's it. I'm fine with this car that looks like a shoebox and goes this fast and gets great gas mileage, and that's it. You get the Ferrari, then you'll see somebody with a Maserati and you want that instead. And then you see somebody with the Lamborghini and you want that instead. And then you see whatever, and you're always looking for the next thing, right? There is no quenching that thirst. And if we give into this cycle of desire and we think this is where our happiness is going to come, is from going after these things that we desire, you've got a rude awakening coming. It will never happen that way. The desire will never get completely sated, and you will just continue desiring more and more and more and more. So if we look back on this idea of anticipation or fear, this is some of the most common suffering that we will undergo. So a great example that I heard several times and repeated all the time is, let's say that you are in the office or whatever, you're at home, your home office, wherever you work. You're not in the dojo, because there's no suffering in the dojo. It's all suffering. You're at work and somebody just slams a pile of paperwork on your desk, and you immediately think like, ugh, it's Friday, it's 4 o'clock, and I was about to cut out early, but now I'm going to stay until midnight going through all this stuff. That's suffering. That's the epitome of suffering, because you can see it right here, clear as day. You know that this rough thing. The thing is, when you're actually doing the paperwork, it's not as bad as the anticipation of it, right? But let's tweak it slightly. You get that paperwork slammed down on your desk, and you know you got to stay for XYZ amount of time, but you also know you got a secret. Is it Labor Day weekend? You're going on vacation. Tomorrow, you're jumping on a plane and you're going to whatever far off tropical location. It's going to be beautiful. You're going to be sitting on the beach, sipping whatever beverage you love to sip on the beach. And it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be warm. It's going to be relaxing. Your cell phone isn't even going to work. There's no paperwork in sight. It could not be better. And on Friday, when you're supposed to be doing your work, maybe you are physically doing it, maybe not, but you are actually living on the beach because you know it's coming and you are excited and you cannot wait, and you're fine dealing with whatever you got to deal with now because you know that your near future is that. So anticipation can also be the opposite of suffering, right? It can be just joy, fun anticipation, great. And then you get to the beach and maybe you spend one good day there, but then it's Sunday or Monday on a 3-day weekend, and now that whole day is spent thinking about how you have to go back to work the next day and you've got whatever you didn't finish of that stack of paperwork, and you're physically on the beach and it's warm and it's supposed to be relaxing and you may even still have that drink and whatever else, but now in your mind you're anticipating and you are in fear of, you are just so anxious about having to go back to work. So that is your mental and emotional state. You are in suffering, even though you're in one of the most beautiful possible locations on earth. So the anticipation is one of the roughest things here. And I'm going to walk off screen while I scroll down. Great. So, I forgot. I got like a bunch of quotes here, and some of them are going to be great. Some of them are going to be fine. But this quote is from, I believe it's Michel de Montaigne. A man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears. So when we are in that fear state, and we're thinking it's like there's nothing to fear but fear itself, it is that anticipation that is actually the worst. And if we could let go of the anticipation or fear, then the suffering would be minimized or possibly just disappear completely. I'm going to get into that later on when we start talking about how we deal with suffering. Ooh, my mouse in my pocket got messed up. Let's go. All right, I'm just going to do this over here because my technology is not the way that I want it to be. So when we talk about the necessity of suffering, so Buddha says life is suffering, and as I was talking about before, this is certainly true. So if we are alive and we're in this body, we're going to suffer. Again, that doesn't mean that you have to suffer. It doesn't mean that you are always going to suffer. It means that you are almost certainly going to suffer, because that is what naturally happens to us unless we're able to deal with it. This Nietzsche quote, Nietzsche was an expert on suffering. If you've never read Nietzsche, go for it. You'll suffer too. So to live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. I like this quote, but I'm going to change it slightly. I think to live is to suffer, but to thrive is to find meaning. So if we're in the part of this talk that's about the necessity of suffering, if we are able to find meaning in suffering, then we are able to grow from it. We're able to become our highest self. And over time, the suffering can shape and improve us. This next quote, I think, is about that. Ooh, no, I pressed the wrong button. Okay. Yeah, man cannot make himself without suffering, for he is both the marble and the sculptor. You've heard me use this analogy before when we talk about like technique or finding our highest self. If we imagine ourselves as a block of marble, and then we think about making a sculpture, it's not by adding pieces onto the marble. That's not going to go very well. It's by chipping away pieces. And underneath that marble is perfection. It is our highest self. It is however close to perfection in anything that we are doing that we can get, is by chipping away from the unnecessary. But that kind of shaping that we get, if you are the marble and let's say that you're a marble that can feel pain, it's rough, it's suffering as you're being chipped away at. And all that stuff that you think of as being yourself, when it gets taken away, that is incredibly painful. And that is very often incredible suffering. But then when we get to what is beneath that, it's been through suffering. It can deal better with suffering. Your highest self is what is beyond ego, but even your ego mind that has really suffered has tools to be able to deal with it. So when we look at that process, we are both the marble that is being shaped, but also the artist, the sculptor that is doing the shaping. And this is what our practice and our art is like. You can think of the art as the thing that we are creating with our body. You can also think of it as like the thing that flows through you naturally, but it's like we are the art and we are the thing doing the art, but it's not the ego doing the art. The ego suffers. When you let go of it, then you are that perfect sculpture that's left. This one is Khalil Gibran, and he says, out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls, the most massive characters are seared with scars. And suffering, of course, builds character. And this is absolutely true of our practice. This is absolutely true of anything that you do that's really worth it, that is difficult. And when you put yourself through it, one of the things that you get out of it is you're better able to deal with suffering in the future. But it gives you perspective, right? When you are dealing with something difficult, but you've already dealt with something that is even more difficult, you can look back on that and say, it's not that bad. I've been through worse than this. I have the perspective that allows me to not suffer as greatly in this moment because I've already dealt with it. So recognize, and this is one of the ways that we can actually overcome suffering in the moment, is to remember that we've probably been through something worse and we're still alive and we're probably better for it. You can recognize that whatever you're going through now, in many cases, is going to better prepare you for what's coming in the future. So that kind of logical mindset of just recognizing how suffering has helped us in the past and this suffering is here to help us for the future is great. And then you can let go of feeling like, when is this going to stop? If you get really kind of into your practice and a little bit nuts from it, you start to really enjoy and seek out the suffering. So the first couple of tests for me when I was in my early stage of martial arts were rough, but as soon as I got this, I kind of flipped this switch and got this perspective or this point of view on the test, that like this is a great opportunity for me to push myself and find out what I'm capable of, so that I know what I'm capable of, and I know that I can do even more in the future. This became something that I really started to kind of step into and be really excited about. Test is coming, and for many people and for many students here, I say, you've got a test, it's coming in a month. That whole month is suffering because you're the entire time thinking about how hard the test is going to be and how you're sure you're going to fail because you're going to screw it up massively. And when you're actually doing the test, of course it's terrible, but you know that it's imminently going to be over. And so it's not as bad. The lead up is always the worst part, unless you have that kind of special psychosis that a martial artist with experience suffers from, where you realize, like, this is going to be great. I'm going to be able to find my limits. I'm going to push myself and be able to be like forged anew. It's like you're being thrust into the fire and, you know, being hammered out and sharpened like a sword, and you come out just this incredible weapon or tool or whatever. So to look forward to that it really takes something, but it is certainly possible. It's something that we should all get from our practice, at least eventually. So when we talk about overcoming suffering, again, back to what I was talking about in the beginning of class, if we take it personally, we're certainly going to suffer. So to overcome that part of it, you just don't take it personally. And there's this quote from Don Miguel Ruiz. I think he wrote the 4 Agreements. It's the 4 Agreements, not the 5 Agreements, right? It's something about agreements. It's a great book. I recommend it. It says, don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. So certainly a large source of our suffering is our interactions with other people. And it could be something very blatant. This person says something to me that hurts my feelings. It can be this person does something to me. It could be this person looks at me just like, and it's something that we interpret as being something very personal. The truth is, this person can do something that they are really trying to hurt us with. I mean, they are purposefully trying to make us suffer. And if your mindset is that other people are in charge of how much you suffer, then of course you will suffer there. But if your mindset is like that's your thing, man. You can feel however you want to feel. You can say however you want to feel. You can say whatever you want to say. It does not need to impact me. Now, we don't want to turn into robots and just be totally aloof and like unable to empathize with what somebody else is going through. But that's distinct from every time somebody says something or does something, we take it personally, take it on, and get attached to that. So taking it personally is just another way of being attached. And this is what the ego is great at. The ego is great at taking things personally, because if we view ourselves as separate from everybody else and everything else, then of course, everything that happens, we take personally. It's like, this is happening to me, my separate entity that is me. And we're seeing everything through the eyes or the lens of this separate thing. And we're viewing everything as how it impacts us as individuals on a personal level. If we can get beyond that and get a bigger perspective, we look at things from a longer view or from a wider view. For example, from the view of a martial artist in this community, or the view of you as a part of your family, or as just a human being. I love this. I heard this at some point. Rolex is one of these companies that takes a really long view, and I forget what it is, but they have a plan that's like a 100-year plan, or maybe even more than that. But it's like, if we could be like Rolex and have a plan that's like, what's going on after I die? This is a very different way of looking at things. If I'm making plans for after I'm dead, then it's not all about me, right? Some people, I gave this talk about bonsai a long time ago. One of the greatest lessons we can learn from planting a seed that is going to be a bonsai that's going to live to be 100 or more years old. I know I'm not living 100 more years. I secretly think that I might actually live 100 more years, but you're almost certainly, if you're planting seeds like that, you're making plans that are going to extend far beyond your life. And this is great. Anytime you can connect to that, it helps you to not take things so personally when you have that wide view, that long view. So living in the present, if we recognize that so much of suffering comes from anticipation, then all we need to do is live in the present. If we are here now, of course there can be pain here, but suffering does not happen right now. Suffering is about, what you're attached to, what you think is going to happen, desires, all of that. Living the present is just this. It might be pain, but you are able to connect to or let go of the physical sensation of pain. It doesn't mean anything other than pain. That's it. And whatever mental or emotional pain you're experiencing, it's the same thing. In this moment, you can be happy, and this is the only time that you really can be happy. Of course, you can be happy looking back on fond memories, but that's still you in this moment being happy, right? And when you're able to, I don't like using the word control because it seems too attachment based, but when you're able to, flow into whatever kind of mental state or emotional state and connect to whatever memories or thoughts you want, you are able to then decide. And sometimes you might decide, I need to be sad right now. I need to be angry right now. I need to be happy. I need to celebrate, whatever it is, right? You want to be able to choose those things. But that only happens when you're able to create the space in this moment. And when you stand in the present, then you can choose what direction you go. This is one of the greatest gifts that our meditation can give us, is this clearing from whatever mental state we were attached to before, and the opportunity to then choose what comes next. And we might only be able to choose what comes next in the next 5 seconds, but that's great. That 5 seconds is over. You realize that you're stuck somewhere else again. All right, now you make a new clearing and a new choice. Now I get to decide what's going on with these next 5 seconds. So this is part of our practice, is being able to recognize as soon as we lose it, bring it back, and then be able to be totally present as often as we can, as many times as we need to in meditation, and for as long as we can in meditation. So I'll finish with Buddha's words on this, because he was also an expert. So he says, this is the noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering, union with what is displeasing is suffering, separation from what is pleasing is suffering, not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, he says the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. 5 aggregates, I'm not going to get into that, but everything is suffering, right? And this does not mean that our truest nature is suffering. It means that what we're kind of born into and given by society and just being normal is suffering. So what's available to us is beyond that. But if you expect a relief from suffering to just fall into your lap, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to do work and choose. It says, this is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. It is this craving which leads to re-becoming, which is this concept of reincarnation. So if we're still in this state, and we're still in suffering, and we're still attached in the ego, we're going to reincarnate according to this. So I'll go back. The noble truth of the origin of suffering is this craving, which leads to re-becoming, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. That is craving for sensual pleasure, craving for becoming, craving for disbecoming. So if we are in that place of desire, or in that cycle of desire, and we don't get over it, this is what some people say leads to reincarnation, because you don't get past it. And so you have to be born again until you get past it. You keep getting born again. You can believe that or not, but you certainly recognize the same type of experience in one life, right? You're going to have the same kind of experiences over and over and over again until you're able to move beyond it. So we have the same desires, and getting them met does not help them disappear, because there's just another desire waiting for us. The only real way to go beyond suffering is letting go of it, letting go of the desire. He says, this is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering. It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. So this is a word, remainderless, fading away. I've never heard that before. And in fact, they've placed a red squiggly line under it, so it may not be an actual word. But I love it. Whatever word sticks with you that helps you to remember that the way beyond suffering is just letting go. If we're attached to whatever we're attached to, it will not stay forever, or we will not ever get it in the first place. So let go of it. This is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering, the noble eightfold path. right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. That's 8. Now, meditation plays a big role in this. And this, if you're viewing it in a certain way, you can look at the Eightfold Path as like a judgment on an ethical level. And if that's what's there for you, you're going to have to recognize that, because if you have a kind of morality or ethical attachment, and I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, although it is an attachment, so on the attachment level, sure. But if you are not living right, for example, you're not doing that one of right living or right view or right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, all of these things, these are like the actions in the way that we're living, the way that we're going through life. Let's say that you are sitting to meditate, or even you're just laying down to go to sleep, and your mind is buzzing. What is it usually buzzing with? It's buzzing with all the stuff that you did wrong that day, or all the stuff that you're worried about having to deal with later on, or whatever else it is. So meditation helps us to live better and be more present, be in the moment. But it also goes the other way. It's a two-way street where living right helps us with our meditation. If we sit to meditate and we have all of this junk in our head because of the things that we feel like we didn't do correctly, then that meditation is going to be awful. You're just going to sit there and stew in your attachments and your desires and your anxiety and thoughts. If you're able to, even for one day, or even for just like the time immediately leading up to your meditation, if you're able to take care of business and just deal with stuff so that it's not stuck in your mind, if you're able to have that difficult conversation with this person that's been weighing on you for so long, and you know you need to have it, and you know you should have had it already, but you just can't bring yourself to do it, that's going to be what you sit there and think about in meditation. So take out the trash before meditation if you can. Live the way that you really desperately want to be living. And then when you sit, all that's going to be there is space. Freedom for your mind to flow and roam without being stuck and attached to anything that happened in that day or that's going on with life. Easier said than done, but possible. This is how we are able to get beyond suffering, is to let go of desire, to let go of fear or anticipation, anxiety for what's coming next, to be able to just be totally in the present. And if that seems very simple, but also still just an incredibly tall order, that's why they say life is suffering, because you will likely not fully get past it. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try. We have to try. It's what we're here for. It's the purpose of suffering, is to get beyond it. And when we fail, that's great. We pick ourselves up and we try again and we keep going. So in this meditation is very often suffering, because we're in our meditation, and first of all, of course, it's painful to just sit here in this way, but the breath is boring, so we start getting attached to these other thoughts, and we just start running through these whatever cycles of thought, desire, of fear, anxiety in our head. So we want to be able to let that go. But in your meditation, you can recognize that those thoughts and that suffering is there for a reason. It is there for you to overcome. So when you have the thought, rather than letting your mind go down this rabbit hole of, how come I keep having thoughts? Why am I so terrible at meditation? Why can't I get this? That's just your ego trying to suffer more because it loves to suffer. It's so good at it. Just let it go. You can label it as thoughts. Whatever the most disgusting thought that you have is, the thing that keeps coming back and you cannot let it go. It could be the most terrible thing that you're embarrassed of. Okay, thought, that's it. It's gone. When we get attached to it, that's when it has power. When we just let it go, that's when it's powerless over us. In that moment, when we're connecting to our truest self, that is beyond suffering. That is when we are in just a complete clearing, able to be exactly the way that we want to be. So let's practice. Sit comfortably.